And we're live. What's up, y'all? What's up, Doug? How's it going?
Hey, friends. How are you, Benny?
Doing great. So, just want to say hi and welcome to everybody tuning in for another session of Portland Cocktail Week's Distance Learning. We've got a really special guest talking about a really cool subject today, which is fermentation, souring, pickling, all the delicious things that I personally love. So I can't wait to get into that. But before we do, I want to talk a little bit about Wild Turkey. So we're the sponsor for today's session, obviously. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to talk a little bit about our fermentation. So, it's a little bit of a different type of fermentation than the pickling and things that we're going to get into. But there's definitely some crossover and connection in the fact that at Wild Turkey, we use a proprietary yeast strain, meaning we're the only ones that have it. It was propagated from our region of Kentucky at least 66 years ago. We know that because we have a master distiller that's been there that whole time. So Jimmy Russell started in 1954, and one of the first things he learned, around the distillery a few years into his career, he started to learn about the yeast and learn how to cultivate the yeast. So oftentimes the way I like to compare our yeast is, in terms of baking bread. You've got your instant bagged yeast, and then you've got your sourdough, your natural yeast and bacteria that you propagate yourself. And that is kind of the way that we do things. So I think super fitting to be the sponsor today. We have a product that is super traditional, is made with these classic methods. And I think a lot of what Doug is going to talk about today is also very traditional and old school methods of pickling. So really excited to get into it. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Doug. Please introduce yourself, tell us a little more about you, and then we'll get into this.
Yeah, thanks, Benny. So I'm Doug Raquel. I'm in Long Island, New York. Just my Instagram pop up right on the screen. I've been a beverage director for a while now, a couple different locations, my cocktail bars out here on the island. But, we obviously all had some free time over the last year and a half or so, and I know everyone spent it differently. Some people picked up on I guess some longer term hobbies, things that take a little bit longer than, just the finding the off recipe and giving it a shot. So, I mean, you were even saying before when we were chatting, like you messed around with that a little bit, right? During your downtime, buddy?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing sourdough bread for the first time in my life. I think that was pretty common last year.
I heard a lot of
like
that.
you mentioned, a lot of bread baking. I didn't start actually until earlier this year, but yeah, I mean, I made my own sourdough starter, and it took 2 weeks of just like trusting and trying, till that thing really came alive. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's super fun.
Dude, for sure. And it's one of those things that, like, I know with bread as well, like the longer you leave it, it'll keep growing, it'll keep developing, and it'll keep kind of changing over time. One of my best friends was doing a lot with the bread as well, but like sourdough into pizza. I got really into like pizza baking. I guess my sensibilities from a bar manager, like batching things and working on large scale, batches all the time. I don't know what it was, but something in my mind with all the downtime, I missed it. For whatever reason, I just couldn't get away from it. So I kind of got into pickling, messed around with, first it was hot sauce. It was last year, I guess September, October, I did my first batch. And then when I realized it was good, I tried to scale it up, because then I ended up doing a whole bunch of hot sauce flavors as Christmas gifts. For the holidays, I was able to make a whole bunch of it, batch it big, process through a whole ton of it, and send out some gifts to some friends. In the meantime, they came out really good, and it had me continue on the journey to keep experimenting a little bit. The hot sauce turned into pickles, turned into kimchi, and they're things that I've definitely integrated into my diet. Things that I enjoy and kind of look forward to now. And I feel like in our industry, like there are certain things that skills that we have that lead to our ability to like try new things, right? Because we've seen in the past, like when we try things, we learn new techniques, and it kind of informs what we do going forward. And I feel like fermenting for me, I don't want to say it was necessarily gate kept, but it always felt like a difficult thing to get into. And honestly, doing it for a while now, it's not that hard. There's a little bit of equipment you might have to purchase. A lot of it you probably already have on hand. I just think that getting the first batch out of the way and like seeing the process yourself will kind of inspire to continue and keep going on with it. So if I could do anything, I would love to just kind of show off kind of how it doesn't have to be as hard as it seems and how you could make some cool stuff right in your own house.
Awesome.
Man.
I'm super excited to dive in and learn this myself. I actually did experiment with a little bit of pickling now that I totally forgot I did this. And it's probably because I didn't leave it long enough to actually ferment, and I just ate it because it was so good. But I basically did I did kimchi cucumbers with carrots and green onion, like all in the jar.
Man,
and I even did like a little like I took like a little flour and water and made a little like starter, I guess, put that in there. Like I did the whole thing. I just didn't leave it long enough, but still good.
Got some recipes and some techniques that have worked for me. So hopefully I'm going to link and I'll have all the information up with the recipes and the techniques. Love to talk through it. And we'll get you going. Awesome. You'll try another batch.
Let's check this out.
All right, word. Yeah, so that's me, Doug Brickell. So with the time, making stuff, I started to distribute some product to friends and family. And I started Brickell's Pickels. So the Instagram for that is listed up as well. Yeah, let's get going with it. Dive into a little bit of the basic science. I'm coming at this as an enthusiast. I don't claim, like other parts of my life. I used to be a teacher, so I would claim expertise over language. I was teaching middle school. As a bar manager, I claim a certain amount of expertise over what we do there. I'm not an expert at this. This is just what's worked for me and some of the things that I've learned that I definitely want to share through. So the science I want to go over, probably on the basic side, but I just wanted to touch through, and we'll go from there. So pickling, all this kind of works back to lactofermentation, which is a different, there are multiple styles of fermentation. This is the one that we're kind of going to focus on. So basically what happens is lactobacillus is naturally occurring on the outside of fruits and vegetables that we pick up, from the supermarket, better from the garden or from the farm, but whatever you can get hands on. Either way, and it's not a dirty thing, but lactobacillus, it's naturally occurring bacteria, and for our person, it's good bacteria. We're going to use it as a benefit. I'm just going to use lactobacillus or lactic acid bacteria there as the placeholder for the yeast and everything living on the outside of the fruits and vegetables that's going to do what we need. There are lots of different kinds and strains and types. I can't dig into that too much. If you want to go through, I recommend the NOMA Guide to Fermentation. It's really well written. That thing reads like a textbook. Some really good information, some really great recipes. Yeah, so let's move along. If we see what else we got. Thanks, Dave. So the lactic acid bacteria, or the lactobacillus, over the course of fermentation is going to eat the carbohydrates, basic sugars, and turn it into lactic acid. So the sweet flavors that naturally occur in the fruits and veg are going to turn sour, right? As it ferments, the pH is going to lower. We're going to turn much more acidic. Acidic foods are different than fresh foods in that less prone to spoilage, right? You're going to get really good shelf life out of this. I have some kimchi I'm going to show you afterwards. I think that batch is from last November. It's still delicious. Different people have a different tolerance for sour or what they're looking for flavor-wise, but I love it. So less prone to spoilage is going to stay because we're inhibiting microbe growth because it can't live in acidic environments. What we need to know also is that the bacteria we're going to utilize are salt tolerant, so they're going to live in salt-rich environments, as well as acid tolerant. So a lot of the bad bacteria can't live in those environments where the good ones do. So what we're going to do is we're always in the battle of good bacteria versus bad. And what we want to do is kind of stack the deck to make sure that the good guys are going to win every time. All right, so if you leave a cucumber out, it's going to go bad. I'm sure, we're bar managers, bartenders. I'm sure you've seen or forgotten about a cucumber in the back of a fridge, or it falls onto a different shelf where it's not necessarily supposed to be, they go soft, they go mushy, they go dark, they're gross. But they're also in an air-rich environment. The air plus lactobacillus is just going to spoil, where if we could create a salt-heavy, acid-heavy, and an environment without air, that's where we're going to be able to ferment successfully. So far, so good, Benny. Oh, man.
Awesome.
All right. So what does this mean for us, right? Understanding that what we're really doing is doing a controlled rot of these vegetables, right? So in creating the environment, like I said, salt heavy, acid heavy, low oxygen. What we want to do is start with really fresh, really crisp, great textured produce. It's only going to soften. And we'll talk about kind of how in the end, like when we figure out how to pull it, when to pull our pickles, we want to be kind of at that intersection of where the flavor is getting better and better and better. And as the texture is degrading, we want to cut it off kind of before it gets mush. But nothing's going to ever get crispier, so we really want to start with primo product. Control your cleanliness, right? We're going to talk about not only cleaning. You need to not only clean and wash, we're going to sanitize a lot of what we use. The failure to sanitize and clean properly may lead to a failed fermentation or an unhealthy or an unsafe fermentation down the road. So whatever we could do at the beginning to kind of control everything going forward, we want to be on top of it. So the optimal environment, right? We're going to add enough salt to draw out water. We want to, like I said, keep the harmful bacteria from dominating. We want to make sure the good lactobacillus is what's in charge, doing what we want from it. Anaerobic, meaning oxygen-free environment. The way that that's going to work for us is we make sure everything is submerged below the level of the water or the brine. And what that's going to do is keep everything away from the air. If anything's kind of floating above the water line, that's when you have the potential for mold. We're going to also consider where we keep our buckets or our jars, right? If it's too hot, we're going to ferment too fast. Sometimes that'll lead to a mushy ferment, or just not a lot of complexity. Lower temperatures will tend to ferment slower, but will also build better, more complex flavors over time. So again, there's kind of an intersection to that where we want to be. I've read a whole bunch. I've seen from a lot of different sources. I said up a few degrees up or down from 70 degrees Fahrenheit. I've seen like 66 to 74 kind of as where you want to be. Again, much lower or much higher will affect it in the end. I just kind of go with room temperature, and I've definitely seen a change in time and quality depending on the time of year, where room temperature might be a little bit warmer or a little bit cooler, but it'll just inform like whether you feel like where you live, you can keep it in a garage, or if you do what I do, just keep it right in your kitchen. Something actually really cool that I found, this guy Chili Chump on YouTube, what he did, he calls it the Ferminator. And what he actually did, it's a really cool setup. Definitely look into it. What he ends up doing is he got an old fridge or freezer, just because it'll keep the temperature consistent on the inside. And basically he hooked it up where it has a small heating element on the bottom with a fan, so it'll kind of keep that consistent temperature. I think he sets it at whatever, 71 or 72. And then, he has like a temperature controller, so like a thermostat, so it'll either turn on or turn off. So he keeps it at a very, very consistent temperature, no matter what's going on outside. I'm not to that level yet. I'm not doing batches quite that big, but it's just a cool thing to consider if your environment already isn't necessarily correct for proper fermentation. Once everything's kind of set, you just want to check on it every once in a while. A lot of the work is the beginning when you set everything up, and then like something like hot sauce, you're going to process it at the end. But in between, you're really not doing much. You're kind of just watching it. You're looking for bubbles. The CO2 coming off of the actual fermentation is going to be a clue that everything's working. You'll want to reach in with gloves, feel the texture of the vegetables, make sure nothing's getting too mushy. Look for the aromas to change. I have a couple batches I'm going to show you in a minute, and they've been going, today's 12, so they're almost done. And I'll tell you, every time I open those, they stink. In a great way. Like, I love that, but if you're not a pickle person, you'd walk in here and be like, bro, it definitely smells a little bit like a deli. I think it's delicious. I love it, But yeah, you're going to look for that really kind of tasty, rich, funky flavor that you would expect in fermentation. Let's go on. Let me tell you a little bit about some of the equipment you might want to pick up. So depending on the size, on the scale, right? All different sizes of jars you can go get. It's actually super difficult for a while because I think a lot of people were doing this at home. So for a minute, it was real tough to get hands on jars. So when I did see them, I bought all of them. So now I have an absolute ton of jars. If anyone needs, let me know. So you have smaller ones up to, there's about I believe, a half gallon to a full gallon jar. Right? So depending on the size, you'll want to approximate for the correct size jar. When we talk about trying to keep air out, right, you want to make sure that whichever size you do based on the batch, you want full close to the top, right? Not to the very top, but close to the top. If you do it like to the middle and there's a lot of air, you're inviting mold. So the size is going to be important there. If you're doing a big one, like you can see some of those 5-gallon buckets in my bathtub as I scaled up. I mean, this last batch of pickles I'm doing is actually a 50-pound bushel I started with. That's the largest batch I've done yet. That is currently in 3 5-gallon buckets, which obviously will not fit in my home sink. So the bathtub has been a godsend. But yes, in selecting the right plastic buckets, if you're going big, you can't use the Home Depot Homer buckets, right? We've seen those orange ones. Sometimes people use for batching real quick. It's not going to work long term. It's going to leach out some problematic things into the final ferment, which may not be safe. They will say if they're food safe, they're probably an extra $1 or $2. That's what you want. Past that, let's see, what else are we going to need? Fermentation weights. So I have a couple of these ready. So we talk about how you're going to want to keep the level of whatever's fermenting down low below the water level. So within the jar, right, let's say you fill up to about here, the brine's going to be above. By dropping in a glass weight, these are made of stone. Buddy Jared Sedoyan got me these for Christmas last year. They are dope. It'll kind of keep everything submerged and healthy and safe for you. It won't allow the mold to grow above. In a pinch, right, if you can't get hands on these, I mean, everything's available on Amazon. You'll be able to find it wherever you're looking. If for whatever reason you don't have, the best tip that I've seen is to take water or literally the same brine that you're going to be using for your ferment, fill it into a Ziploc, about half full. That'll sit kind of on the top and it'll keep everything else below. You'll want to use water or the brine just in case it pops open. It's not going to ruin everything. In addition, we talk about airlocks. Airlocks are super cool. The first ferment or two I did not have airlock. Then once I learned about them, I stocked up. I have a ton of them now. So the airlock has 3 pieces, right? So basically what happens is, on this top. So top that you'll want to use for a ferment in a glass jar is going to have a little hole in it. If not, actually I have a slide. I'm going to show you how to drill it. So with that, this would allow air in and out. Using the airlock, right? It's 3 pieces. Let me show you each one. So what it'll do is this bit you have some little holes on the bottom. Make sure you can see those. And then those holes lead straight out the top, right? So imagine the air is going to be able to come up from the bottom and come out. What we're actually going to end up doing is use this cap, which is perforated on the bottom, and this cap as well, which is also perforated on top. What we'll do is actually fill this with water above the level of the holes. So what that'll do is when this is in, air will be able to come out from the jar, up the holes and out. It'll hit this water, come out, and then be able to escape out the top. At the same time, though, no air can get in. So this is going to save us from having to burp our ferment, where, as things ferment, CO2 is released. And if we don't burp it, if we don't open it every once in a while, it could potentially explode. I have a friend actually had a kimchi jar explode once. I think it still smells in his house. This was like years ago. So it'll save you a little bit of work on the front end, but at the same time, it's just going to ensure air can come out, nothing's getting in.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've seen those. I know they use those in like home brewing as well, but I never actually knew exactly how they work. And it's really cool how the water keeps the air from getting in, but still allows it to permeate out.
I love it too because it's such an elegant solution. I mean, we're talking about fermentation that's been done for centuries, millennia. It's such an elegant, low-tech solution to do exactly what we need. I think it's genius. There are a couple different styles, and they all kind of do the same thing. So, like I was saying, that top that I showed actually has a hole. For some of these big 5-gallon food safe ones, you could buy them pre-drilled, but they're expensive. What I've done instead is I actually invested in a 5/8 inch drill bit. So the outside of the hole, I'm sorry, the inside bit, these are grommets. This is kind of what's going to keep everything airtight to make sure, that the airlock will actually fit into it. And this will stay airtight within, up against the walls of the top itself. So generally an airlock will come with that grommet, or otherwise I just bought a whole bunch of extra ones. So with that drill bit, these are about 3/8 of an inch inside, 3/8 of an inch inside, 5/8 outside. These are super cheap. You can find them on Amazon. It's good to have hands on. So even if I don't have the proper top, I can kind of make it at this point. I'm not a handy person, so that was actually a really big deal for me.
I feel you on that. I always feel like super accomplished when I build something.
That's about the extent of what I could do, is drill a single hole now, but I'm very proud of me. All right, a couple other little things. So important, like I said, not only cleanliness, but sanitization. So I invested in Star San. It's generally, from what I understand, used in breweries, like to sanitize big brew tanks and stuff. What I've done, it comes as a concentrate, so you kind of just put a little bit in a spray bottle, fill it up with water, and you have sanitizing solution. It'll obviously clean everything, but it's also food safe, which is super important. So even I'll use it to sanitize the jars, the buckets, the tops, the airlocks, and then even like if I'm bottling hot sauce or something, I'll spray some into the bottle and then top it with the hot sauce. It's food safe, so it's not an issue there, but it'll make sure everything inside is going to be clean, and then that will become shelf stable long term. A couple other little things you might need: pH meter or pH strips. You probably remember these from high school science class, right? It's going to check, especially for anything that you're looking to shelf stabilize, like a hot sauce that we're going to actually go through and pasteurize. You'll want to look for certain key markers, certain numbers, to make sure that the shelf stability of it will be healthy and safe. Painter's tape, label everything, just like every bar manager has told, every kitchen manager and chef has ever told anyone who worked with them there. I'm used to, obviously being in a bar, I'm used to labeling things, but at the same time, I'm also used to things being done, made one day and used within the next few days. So even if something doesn't have a label, you can definitely, generally, usually look back and figure out who made it, where it came from, what it is. Dude, I forget these things are. At some point, last year I probably had 7 or 8 different jars going at once. I don't know what's what. I don't know when I made it. I don't know when it should be finished. You don't remember. You think you will, you won't. That's also why I put together a fermentation journal. I literally have a notebook. I think it came as a brand one, and I fill it with, sort of recipes and ideas and things that I've done, knowing that in a few weeks I can look back and remember exactly what I did. I'm one of those that I always overestimate my memory abilities. I figure I'll remember, I'll know what I did, and I still make this mistake. I still do a batch. Crap, I forgot to write it out. It's a really good habit to be in, and I'm not all the way there, but I'm really trying. So I would recommend that anyone else also try, just to give yourself that memory boost, so you don't really have to remember.
If you don't write it down, it's not science.
Truth. Oh, 100%. And it's less even about remembering what was there. Let's say it comes out great. You want to make it again. You want to have that ability to put together another batch of that. Dude, if you can't remember, how miserable. I've been there. I've done it. And probably more times than I want to admit, to the point that I think about things that I would have, recipes that I've lost into the ether, over the years. But that would be my recommendation, to put everything together. So I think the next slide, if you're not going to go with a jar, another option is this really cool Korean fermentation box. I use this for my kimchi. It's a really elegant sort of one-size-fits-all solution. You can find them online, but I've had really good luck in Korean grocery. They have all different sizes, all different styles. So it's basically 3 pieces, right? You got the big box, you got the top that secures really tight, so that's going to be airtight in the end. Where the genius comes in is this middle bit. Let me pull it out. So this top fits flush to the sides with a little air hole right in the middle that'll allow, so it'll create a vacuum, right? So basically you fill everything up to the level of where you want it, and this pushes in directly over the top. So it'll literally sit right at the face of whatever you're fermenting until the liquid just pokes out the hole. You cap it, and you're oxygen free. I think it's a really clever way to start. And I want to say that small one was about probably $15. I think that's 5 liter. I have a 9 liter also that I think was 20. I mean, it's not an expensive way. What you really just want to be careful with and make sure is that the orange ring, the rubber bit around the outside, make sure that it's really airtight. Because if that kind of flops out, that's going to allow air in, you're losing the whole point of it. Yeah. Cool.
Quick question.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So with the jars, you have the airlock that allows
Yes.
it to burp itself. Does this one have a mechanism that does that naturally as well?
Great question. It doesn't in an automatic sense, kind of like how the airlock will. I would definitely recommend taking off the top and kind of opening the little hole daily. That would be your burping. I would also use this for shorter term ferments. So like when I make kimchi, I'll leave it on the table for 3 or 4 days total, where the pickles I'm leaving for 2 weeks plus. Hot sauce, I've gone up to 4 months. And that could go obviously much longer. Yeah, so what's cool about these two is depending on if you have room, I probably don't. It'll fit right in the fridge. So it could also work as a storage box. But yeah, so I'll just leave that up for a few days there. Is that it for equipment? Can we get into some recipes? How are we looking?
Let's get into some recipes.
I'm
and
excited.
if anybody viewing right now has questions, throw them in the comments on Facebook and we'll answer them as we go.
Yeah, please do. Just feed them to me. I love it. All right, so if I'm going to make a batch of pickles, I go right through my produce supplier, through my bars. I've picked up at the supermarket before for smaller recipes. I've grabbed from the farm before. If that's an option, get at it. But in the meantime, I use the established relationships that I already have as a bar manager. My produce guy is able to get me 40, 50 pounds at a clip. Generally, my price all in with delivery is less than $1 a pound. So awesome, and they're great quality. So first step, I always want to weigh them. And I'm going to weigh in grams, right? The whole way through. A chef I used to work with taught me that. It's going to be just that much more precise going forward. What I'll also do, and I actually have it right in the front of my fermentation journal, is I keep the tare weight of all the different containers that I use. So looking back, later on in the process, I can always look at that for when I have to subtract the tare to make sure that I'm finding the right ratios. Cucumbers come. I'm going to wash and sanitize. No, I'm not going to sanitize the cucumbers. Apologies. Sanitize the containers. Make sure those are ready to go. At that point, I'm going to wash and inspect my cucumbers. Inspecting, I'm going to look for soft spots. I'm going to look for any cuts. Sometimes, like when they're packaging them or even closing them up, like against the bushel or the box itself, sometimes they'll have scars. I'm going to get rid of those. Not necessarily throw them out. I'll probably make a salad, but I don't want that. Like I said, nothing's ever going to get crispier or better quality, so you want to start with the primo stuff. Now, interestingly, and I didn't know this, the blossom end of cucumbers actually has an enzyme, and that enzyme is over time going to soften the final product. So what I do is I clip it. I just cut off the top. I do both sides just for the consistency of it. Take off the very top, just the very bottom, and supposedly that in the long term will make your cucumbers crispier. Right?
Nice.
So after everything's washed, tops and bottoms trimmed, I'm going to fill up my containers, right? You don't want to overfill. Right? We're not looking to hit the very top, but at the same time, we don't want to underfill because then we're inviting more air to the party. So once they're in the bucket or the jar, add garlic. I've done whole garlic. I've done chopped garlic. And what I also tend to like to do is I'll actually take it and put it right in the blender. A little bit of water to get it going. And then you have like really, really fine garlic, which is just going to infuse the flavor all the way throughout. Generally more intense garlic flavor, which I tend to be looking for in what I'm making. In addition to that, I actually have a batch going now, I'll show you in a minute, with hot peppers too. I threw some habaneros in with that garlic when I blended it. So those are potentially too hot. We'll see in a couple days, but they're actually really delicious. I'm thinking about slicing those thin and selling them more as like a sandwich pickle or something to put like right on a burger versus a whole pickle that you want to take a bite out of with a sandwich. They're aggressive, but they're really delicious. They're going to be great. Excuse me. So everything's in, the garlic, spices, everything's going to go in the bucket with a brine, right? So I'm going to build the brine directly over cucumbers themselves. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the weight of the cucumbers, right? I take the weight of the whole jar, subtract the weight of the container, and I'm going to divide that out. What I want is 2% of that weight, salt. I tend to use kosher salt. I like the texture of it. It's always worked for me. For kimchi, I've actually used Korean sea salt, but you have different options. Any kind of sea salt is good. The big thing you want to avoid is anything iodized, like table salt. That's not going to work. The ratios are going to be all the way off, and I believe the iodine in it will also screw up the process. But yeah, so I'm looking for 2% salt total. That's what's worked for me. There are all different ones. You know, sometimes it'll call for more. I've seen up to 4%, 5%. I like 2. That worked for me. So all the fresh stuff is in. Spices go over the top, and then we are going to fill with water. The next one, Dave.
Awesome. Quick question.
Tell me, bud.
This one's from Facebook, actually. They're wondering if you cut the pickles before or after they're done pickling, and it looks like you put them in whole.
That's a great question. Yeah,
But
I've always done them whole. I have seen recipes that are more designed for canning and long-term storage where they get cut beforehand. I'm not at that point. You know, I'm not making those at this point. These are fresh fermented pickles. So I tend to do them whole. The only thing I remove again is the top and the bottom, the stem end and the other end.
Yep. Awesome.
Okay. So in terms of how long to let them go, I like a sour pickle. I'm going to let it go. I think the earliest I've ever pulled them was day 11 or 12. Generally, I'll leave them a little bit over 2 weeks. Let me show you what I actually have going now. I can show you on this. There it is. Oh, man. Word. So I have a couple batches going. These are the spicy ones I was saying. Oh, I'm sorry. These are the regular ones. So these are garlic sours. Today's day 12 on them. So you can see that the color has completely changed from how green and bright and vibrant they were before. You'll see a little bit of haziness on the brine. And from what I understand, that tends to be the dead yeasts. You know, that's just the lactobacillus towards the end of its life cycle. So if it gets hazy, no issue. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll let it settle towards the end before I package that brine with the pickles. This is, oh, here's another batch. Pull these out. This is the spicy one. So you'll see not only the pickles themselves, I put in some whole habaneros that I just halved up. And again, this had another handful of habaneros that actually went directly into the blender. So again, these, I mean, I can feel it in my eyes just as I mix the brine.
Ooh,
they're going to be delicious.
Send me a couple of those.
Once I can figure out how to ship them, man, you know I got it. Yeah, just another couple days on these, they'll be ready. What I'll tend to do is I'll check on these every day or every other day. And I'll just take a sharp knife and kind of go in from the top. You know, just clip a little bit off of one. And, you know, at that point I could taste and see what's going on. The last one I actually have fermenting right now is I have some, this is the first time I've done this, so I didn't want to speak on it quite yet. These are green tomatoes. You've seen these maybe in delis. They're going to be delicious. I'm really excited about them. They need a few more days, but the sour is finally starting to settle in. You know, the flavor's all there. Sorry, the texture's all there. The flavor is on the way, but real good. And I just did these with some chopped garlic as to not overdo it, some pickling spice, and some allspice. And again, so every time I get into these, what I want to do afterwards is using either a plate or a bowl or a fermentation weight. I want to make sure I press down enough, you know, fill that so that nothing's actually sticking out. I want to keep everything food safe there. Awesome. Let me actually just grab a paper towel. Hold on.
Yep. Well, those are all looking super delicious.
Yeah, dude, those
are all looking really good.
Thank you. All right.
I'm glad you mentioned that hazy white that you get sometimes.
Yeah.
And how that you said it's like the yeast dying off. I've actually got a store-bought jar of pickles right now that the jar is so hazy. And we were kind of like, whoa, are these still good? I was kind of freaked out.
Yeah, I wouldn't be nervous about that. Yeah, I feel like when you get like prepackaged, you know, jars of pickles in the middle of the supermarket, those tend to be in super clear brine. But I think they're adding that afterwards. It's not being fermented in there. This is a whole different style.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think you're good
Cool.
to go on those. Yeah, as long as they smell good. Obviously, you're looking to, yeah, if they ever smell off, you want to get rid of them. Be smart about it. But if they still smell good, get at it. In terms of shelf life, I don't have an actual answer because mine have never sat around long enough. I would measure it in months rather than weeks once they're fully fermented. So you should get some good time on them. I forgot to say that. So in going back to check on them, I always want to look at the texture, obviously smelling, tasting for flavor. If there are soft spots in the end on some of them, you don't have to throw them out. As long as they're, like I said, they smell okay, they look okay. Blend them up, make relish. Put that on your hot dog. Not necessarily something that you want to slice and have a bite of with a sandwich, but if you could blend it up, then you're not quite as worried about texture. So no waste.
Cool.
So like I said, if the smell is off, we want to be aware of that, But if there's visible mold, right? If anything's poking out the top and not staying submerged, that's an issue. That has the potential for mold. If the texture goes like slimy, you kind of want to avoid that. If the color, like these look good, these look brown, but pickle brown, still green enough that I know they're good. If it goes like funky brown, I would reconsider. I've only ever had one batch of pickles that went iffy on me, and I knew it. Like it was one of those things that seeing this, hearing this, you're like, how will I actually know? Will I know? I had that same fear. When it went off, I knew. There was something weird about it. I chucked them. They were a little fuzzy over the top. You could see some mold development. They were just off. So especially us, beverage professionals that were consistently looking at quality and noticing these things, will notice it. Yeah, definitely a good first ferment. How are we going from there? Should we move on to hot sauce?
Yeah, let's keep it moving.
I feel like I'm talking a ton. Any questions coming in or anything else on your end, Benny?
Well, we got some cocktail related questions actually. Just people kind of like trying to get inspired, wondering about using pickled and fermented ingredients in cocktails and also as garnishes. So they're curious if you have any insights on your favorite pickled or fermented ingredients in cocktails or classic cocktails that would be great with pickled garnishes.
I have heard really, really good feedback on martinis using pickled fermented garnishes. Obviously the olive is traditional. I like a little bit of a lemon twist over the top, like the lemon oils. But yeah, if you want to go in with a slice of a pickle or seen like a caperberry, like all different sort of like little fermented bite, a little snack at the end of that, that'd be delicious.
Yeah,
I've seen Bloody Mary's traditional, maybe even a cop out, but
yeah,
I've seen Bloody Mary recipes using olive juice, maybe in place of some sort of vinegar element. I do with pickle juice. There's a restaurant I consult at, and they have a pickle juice-based Bloody Mary that is a great seller for them on the weekends.
That sounds delicious. I've seen pickled green beans too in
both
Bloody Mary and martinis. I think that's a favorite of mine.
I love that. I've made, Brittany, do you plan on expanding into the world's best Bloody Mary garnish? That's a bold statement. Pickled green bean is delicious. I've made them before, but that's kind of a different, at least in my experience, the way I've done it. It's a bit of a different process. It's more of a quick pickle. So at that point, you're heating up a brine of vinegar and salt and sugar and kind of just pouring the warm brine over fresh prep produce, throwing that in the fridge, close up tight, and really just leaving it for a few hours to a few days. And then at that point, it'll kind of stand on its own. I've done that. We actually used to offer a pickle plate at some of my bars where I would do that. I would make a few different brines, or honestly, I would do the same brine poured over multiple vegetables in multiple jars, each one with seasoned differently. So different amount of garlic, or one with more pepper or no pepper, or one with done turmeric. I've done, you name it, anything could go in the jars. You kind of pour the brine over it, close them up, and let them go. It's delicious. It's a different style, so it's not necessarily the fresh ferment that we're talking about today, but 100% those are bomb. So good.
Awesome. Well, speaking of Bloody Marys, do you have a recipe, a go-to Bloody? Or anything that you love?
Anything with my hot sauce in it is going to be delicious. I promise.
Good answer. Good answer. So speaking of the hot sauce, let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the past, I've done two different methods, right? And you can kind of see photos of both. Brine method, where I'm just going to add a prepared brine, a salt brine that I'm making on the side, pouring it over chopped veg. Or the second one you can see here on the right side, the greener of the two photos, is fermenting as a mash. So basically with that method, what I'm doing is processing all the vegetables and aromatics ahead of time, adding salt directly to it, and throwing that in the jar alone. So the biggest difference, besides the obvious texture during the ferment, is the water, right? I'm adding water if I'm making it in the brine mash. I'm sorry, in the brine style. I'm not adding additional water if I'm doing it in the mash style. The water will leach out naturally from the salt, and it'll kind of create its own brine, but it's definitely a drier ferment. So what I would be careful there is just making sure that enough liquid does leach out to sit on top, so you're keeping a safe ferment. I've heard, that's how like Tabasco sauce is made using a mash. So they'll make a pepper mash, add salt to it, and let it sit. What I've heard that they'll actually do is leave salt, like they kind of cover the top of it with salt, which will also impede the bad bacteria growth over time. They're also aging for a very long time. Mine's not quite going as long, but I've found success both ways. Kind of seeing that picture at some point last November, I had a whole lot going on, but all the more reason to make my fermentation journal. You could actually see with that Camp Runamuck handkerchief, that was some tepache I was making too. I'm sure hopefully people have made that for their bars. Otherwise, I definitely recommend it. Super simple. You're looking at fresh pineapple skins. You can use the core, but just the outside skins, because that's going to have all the yeasts, the lactobacillus you're looking for. A little bit of sugar, generally either like coconut sugar or like a Mexican unrefined sugar. Cinnamon, you put star anise, a little bit of vanilla, whatever kind of spice you want. Fill it up with water and just give it a couple days. It'll carbonate itself too. That is delicious. So good. With a little bit of booze and it's done. Like it really needs very little. So looking at all those, right? No matter the method, you could either just use peppers, like a lot of companies will. I like to make it interesting. I add fruits, different vegetables. I give just a couple options. I've done hot sauces with peaches, fresh berries. I did one with blackberries once that came out great. Fresh mango was really good. I like that flavor in there a lot. Different vegetables to add different flavor. I'll add turnips. I did that once where I got hands on these chili peppers. They're called caribe. They were almost white. So instead of adding carrots and a whole bunch of other things like I usually do, I kept everything else that I added to it white to try to keep the color of it super, super light the same. I've added fennel. I've added beets. Same kind of thing. Just trying to alter it up and see what other kind of flavors we can build. I listed Mr. Potato Head. I think we're all familiar with that. When you have a system or when you have a recipe or a technique that works, you can vary the ingredients within it as long as you follow some rules, that are going to make sure that everything works. With that said, you could even add frozen ingredients. I've heard of people, who farm, or maybe they get a really good deal on great quality peppers, throw some in the freezer, right? Because you can have too many more than you could use all at once. You keep them in the freezer. As long as you're using 50% plus of fresh peppers and fresh produce each time, there should still be enough lactobacillus to kickstart the fermentation. So with that said, I think the next batch I'm going to be trying in the next few weeks is I want to actually smoke some peppers. I want to see what cool peppers I can get hands on, but habaneros, jalapenos, whatever it be. But I want to take about half of it, maybe a third of it, bring it outside on the smoker, see if I can develop a cool flavor that way and see if it all works out. I'll update them as that goes through. Yeah, well, I like the fact that it gives you some creativity the same way that we do with cocktails or anything else.
Well, we actually have another question that kind of relates to what you're just saying, mentioning some of the different fruits and vegetables that have gone into your hot sauces. But what is the most unusual ingredient that you've played around with pickling?
Boy. I'm in New York, so it's very rare. I've honestly never seen green tomatoes before. I've had pickled green tomatoes plenty of times, but I've never seen them fresh in the supermarket. So the second I saw them, what was it, 2 weeks ago? I bought them out. I bought them all. I was actually back at that store yesterday, and even though these aren't done yet, I bought them out again. I feel like those are more prevalent, probably easier to find in the South. My produce guy hasn't had luck finding from me in the past. The second I saw those, I was like, get on it. I bought them all. Otherwise, nice. I think the hot sauce I did with beets was probably pretty unique. It worked fine. There's enough sugar in there to really make sure the ferment worked, but I've never seen a purple hot sauce before. It actually came out really delicious. Beets. I supplement
awesome.
at the end with a little bit of vinegar. If you cook it all, beets and vinegar tend to complement really nicely. Yeah, so that worked out better than I had expected. So this is
Very cool.
actually the full recipe which I'm wanting to share for this orange sauce that I made. I call it "Made with Real Apes." It's a joke from The Office, from the wedding episode, if you remember. It's Fresno peppers, apricot, and carrots are the main ingredients. But yeah, the bottled up came out great. So if you want, feel free to screenshot at any time. You're welcome to give these a shot. I'm happy to share, or anything. If anyone after the fact has any questions or wants better specs or recipes, shoot me a note. Feel free. So for this batch, I did this via the brine method. I did not do this as a mash. So I kind of just chopped everything up, and it ended up in the jar. I prepped a 3% salt brine. So that I made that separately. So weigh out the water, add enough salt so that it be 3% of the total weight. Pour it up and over, and the top goes on with the airlock and all. Check on it every once in a while. That went super easy. This was a really good one. This was actually the first one I ever did in a really large batch. I believe this was a 3-gallon batch of hot sauce. It just made processing a little bit difficult at the end. But what I've also learned with a lot of this is whether you're doing a small jar or you're doing a giant 5-gallon bucket, it's generally more or less the same amount of work. So if you're making something you like and you have the means to keep it around or people to share with, just make it big, grow it up.
Yeah.
So the rest of the ingredients there was the chilies, like I said, the apricots. I used garlic and shallot and onion, lots of allium. This is going to add the sugar, adds great flavor. I always add carrots to add a little bit of additional sugar and lengthen it. And our buddy Josh Seberg grew some Carolina Reaper's peppers back at his home in Virginia, and he was kind enough to share some. So if you happen to have one of those that he mailed you, just chop it up or grind it up a little bit in a mortar pestle, throw it in, and let it do its thing.
Awesome.
Yeah, so this was kind of, you can see the processing of it. So once that was the work, that's all the prep. It goes in the jar. You forget about it for a while. Once it's ready and you're ready to process it, based on smell, based on pH, right? If you're going to try to pack it up to sit shelf-stable, make sure you're checking the pH, doing everything safely. In terms of processing, you kind of see what I did. So dump the whole ferment out into a colander, and I'll keep that colander over a big pot. So I'll then be separating the vegetables from the brine itself. At that point, I'll move the vegetables either into a blender, right? I have got a Vitamix back there. Or if you have it in an immersion blender, you can do that. It'll need some liquid, so add a little bit of the brine back at a time, right? That'll end up as part of the final product, but just as well. It has the same taste, it has the same flavor as everything else in there. Mm-hmm. And it'll help it move a little bit. Feel free to supplement that with some vinegar as well. White vinegar is the first one I'll reach for, but I've used apple cider vinegar really nicely, depending on the flavor of whatever else is in there. So what you want to do, what you're looking for, is blending it to a really smooth consistency, and then I'll strain the whole thing. You could actually stop there if you wanted before straining it. Some people like it chunky. This one just happened to be a smooth, just a liquid hot sauce. So the way I strain it is I'll take a super bag, right, a micron bag, or you'll see them on Amazon. Sometimes they call them nut milk bags, like for filling up if you're going to make almond milk or something at home. So basically what I'll do is I'll pour the whole thing into the bag, over a colander, over a pot, so that as I squeeze everything out of the bag, it'll go through the colander into the pot, and it'll all collect down there. One of the coolest things I figured is the pepper mash that you get from straining it there. You'll end up with this really dry, pulpy, peppery bit. Put it into another jar, fill it up about 50-50, the pulp to white vinegar, and shake it up, and you'll end up with this really delicious, like a pepper jelly, like a pepper mash that you could put, kind of spread it onto a sandwich or mix it with mayonnaise or something. Bomb. Really, really, really good. From there, any other steps on that? Yeah, so once that's processed, you'll want to blend it one more time. Generally, I'll do it with the immersion blender to blend in some xanthan gum. If you've used it before, xanthan gum helps stabilize, and it'll help thicken a little bit. If you just took the sauce at that point and like put a drop on your hand, it would roll right off. Once it's blended with a little bit of xanthan gum, it'll kind of pool up a little bit better. So it'll give you a little bit more texture to the resulting sauce. You can see there from one that I used the wrong amount of xanthan gum. So that brown sauce there was actually a really delicious sauce. I'm still enjoying it. It was different because I supplemented, like I dropped the salt a little bit and I used some soy sauce, just for a different sort of salt punch. What I did though is I think I used too little xanthan gum, so it separates. So the picture on the left is kind of how it is when it sits for more than a day or two. I shake it up and it looks fine and it tastes great, but just as that's the reason we're adding just a tiny bit of xanthan gum. For safety, since I am packaging these to be shelf stable, I will pasteurize it. So all the sauce is still on the pot. I'm going to bring it up to about 165. I don't want to leave it there. Hold it there for about 10, maybe even 15 minutes. That'll kill off any kind of bad bacteria, and it'll stop the fermentation. As if this continued to ferment, the same way one of the jars could explode from the CO2, so will one of the bottles if we don't do that properly. While that's cooking and sort of holding at temp, I could go to a higher temp, but I don't want to ruin the fresh flavor. I kind of want to keep that as close to the fresh fermented flavor as possible. While that's heating up and pasteurizing proper, I will rinse and sanitize all my bottles and the tops, and the whole thing from there. And then I got this really cool. It's on the other side. I got this pourer. It looks like a measuring cup with a super long neck. So that's been easy for me to kind of fill up the little tiny bottles. Yeah, that's worked for me. Awesome. These things are tasty, man.
That looks super. I mean, it looks delicious. I love hot sauce as well. So when you're doing these, so you use the same type of sanitizer to sanitize each little bottle?
Josh said he has some on his chicken. It's the way, man. It's so good. Yes, I will sanitize through, but like I said, it's a concentrate. So you just need a little bit, lots of water, and it'll sit for a while. And just a spray of that is really all you need. There's not much to it.
Awesome. And then do you think does the pH matter a ton since you are going to pasteurize and cook it?
That's a great question. I think so, but I can't explain enough why. I want to be I'm not a food scientist and I don't have enough equipment to probably or experience to give a much better answer. I always am looking for that 3 and change up to 4, but I don't know.
Yeah, better safe than sorry, right? It's like, cover all your bases so that it won't spoil.
It will. I mean, when you're talking about oxygen-free environments, then you invite botulism. So especially if we're trying to go, into a sealed container for long-term storage or shelf storage, I could see that as an issue, as a reason why we want to make sure it goes super low. Yeah. I feel like if you're keeping it fresh and just for your own purposes in a small batch and you're just keeping it in the fridge, you probably don't have to play by the exact same rules. But again, better safe than sorry on my end for sure.
Sure. And then before we transition to the last section, we got another question about the hot sauce. Other than the Bloody Mary, any other go-to drinks that you put your hot sauce in?
Oh, what a great question. Probably not. Again, like I said, a martini. I do like a little bit of extra flavor there, be it a fermented snack along with it or in it, or a drop of hot sauce within. We'll add a little bit of something. It's gonna sound weird, but I don't usually like spicy drinks.
Yeah, that's fair. I could see your stuff working good in like sangria or something too.
Yeah, that sounds real good.
Orange lime hot sauce and like some sweetener in there.
I will send you a couple bottles and you send me the spec back and we'll report.
Amazing. Love it.
Dude, I love it.
Cool. All right. Well, let's keep it moving. And we got one more section, right?
Yep. Let's knock it out. We can make some kimchi. This is one of my favorites. I love it. I had never had much kimchi when I was younger, but I've grown to be the person that I would just spend $50 every time I went to the Korean market just on every kind of kimchi I could find. So this, besides being delicious and exactly how I want it, has saved me a ton of money from not buying $50 worth of kimchi every time I go to the Korean market. And it's honestly not that hard. What I have noticed, though, is you need some really big bowls if you're going to make it in any sort of quantity. The bigger the bowls or the bucket, the better. Be ready with it. So I'll start with Napa cabbage. Oh, it's big. You want the crunchiest ones that you can find, right? Wash it in cold water, and a lot of the work here, after it's chopped up and soaked, is the salting. This one I tend to use the Korean sea salt because it feels like the right one to use. And again, kosher salt will work just fine. You're going to want to salt it liberally. Like there are different styles where you use either a whole head of cabbage, a half head cabbage. I'll tend to just chop it just because it's easier on my end. But either way, I'm not measuring the salt. I just want enough to kind of coat everything. I want to be drying the moisture out. And I'm going to leave it, toss it every little while, every 15, 20 minutes for something like an hour and a half to 2 hours. I want to leach out as much as I can. I'm not going to be adding additional salt later on, via salt itself. After that sits for a while, I'm going to wash it again to remove the salt, kind of once it does its job. If we continue through, let's see the next move. That's the one. So I'm actually going to start a second pot, right? I'm going to make a rice porridge. And what this does is it helps all the paste stick to the cabbage and do what it does. So I'm going to use rice flour. Mochiko is the brand that I tend to see. It's a sweet rice flour, from short grain rice. As you heat that with some water, a little bit of sugar, mix it up, cool that on the side. Separately, I'm going to get to chopping, right? So I like to do carrots, Korean radish, or daikon if you can't find Korean radish, scallion, chives, Asian chives. I've seen recipes with pear. Asian pear is a common one to use. Chop it all up, get it ready on the side. So a whole bunch of separate bowls now. Separately, again, in the blender, what I like to do is I'll take garlic, ginger, onion, and you get a jar of Korean fermented salted shrimp. Sounds different. It's super delicious, and it makes a big difference in the end product. If you're going vegan with it, I guess that could be left out, but I wouldn't do that. I'm going to blend all those until smooth because that's going to be a lot of the liquid of the eventual kimchi paste. So now that everything's set, big giant bowl, right? So I'm going to go in with the rice porridge, the pureed garlic and all that, some fish sauce, and then gochugaru, which is Korean hot pepper flakes. You can get these either mild, you get the medium, you get them hot. I tend to start with the mild, and then I'll add the hot ones a little bit at a time until I'm kind of at the level I'm looking for. Again, I'm looking for flavor generally over lots and lots and lots of heat, but you have your options there. Use gloves because otherwise your hands will burn. So in the bowl, right? So we have the rice porridge, we have the puree, we have fish sauce added, all the pepper flakes, and then all the chopped vegetables. Everything's in mix, and you'll kind of get what that first picture looks like, everything in there pre-mixed. A little bit at a time, I'm going to take a handful of cabbage, mix it in with the sauce, put it in my Korean fermenting jar, in the box, Put in some more, mix, put it all in. Until by the end, it should all look pretty much the same. Everything should be coated really well throughout. You'll have the stickiness of the rice porridge. You'll have all the gochugaru, right? The pepper that's kind of going to melt in together. You just want it all in there. I'll leave that on the table 3 days, 4 days. I don't know that I've gone past that. That's about as sour as I like it, 4 or 5 days, I guess. Leave it out, and once you're ready with it, jar it up and throw it in the fridge. Once it's ready to where you want it, you'll want to refrigerate it, which will slow everything down. It won't stop fermentation, but it will slow it, so it'll sit closer to where you like it. That's one I would burp every once in a while. If you leave it in the fridge more than a couple days or weeks, just get in there every once in a while, just pop the top, so no unfortunate explosions. But you want to talk money, at least on my end, money saving, and just a supremely delicious thing to keep around. Just a little bit over rice, fry an egg over the top, a little bit of sesame seed. That's become my favorite dinner. The hard work's done on the front end. The prep a la minute is nothing. It's so good, man. You gotta make a batch. I would definitely recommend trying it.
Yeah, I love kimchi. I'm pretty spoiled. I live adjacent to Koreatown here in Los Angeles.
Oh my goodness.
So I literally have dozens of markets, and they're all massive with every ingredient I could ever need to make this at home. So right now I still have some store-bought kimchi in the fridge, but I think I might have to try this one out too.
I would give it a shot. Like I said, it's the kind of thing that you can scale up. That you make a small batch is going to be about the same amount of work as a big batch. So you might as well just make a big one and share, make some friends, or make your friends happy.
Yeah.
It's
Awesome.
It's a good way to be. And it's one of those things that once I've gotten used to having it in the house, I don't ever want to be without it.
Yeah, it's versatile too. Like you can cook with it. You can throw it in fried rice.
Kimchi fried rice. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So, it's the way. So
delicious.
Good. Oh man. So that's a lot of my experience. That's kind of the way I've done it. Josh has questions. If someone doesn't love the funk, any workarounds or tweaks? You can definitely eat kimchi earlier in the process. So the same way I leave it 3, 4, maybe 5 days, if you can eat it immediately, it won't have that funk. It will have a lot of the same flavor, but you'll get think of, cabbage versus coleslaw or something. How it's going to degrade. You're going to lose a little bit of the water content, but it'll still be crunchy in the same way. Same kind of thing. You could definitely have it earlier in the process if that's how you prefer it. I tend to like mine on the sour side, but it doesn't have to be that way. Give it a day. Try that, Josh.
Awesome.
No?
Cool.
So, a couple takeaways before we let everybody continue their day.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I felt like home fermentation was almost gate-kept because it almost felt like it was too hard or too daunting to get started with. Pick one of these that appeals to you. Give it a shot. It's really not that much more difficult or time-intensive than making anything else. It's just a longer process, right? Take the timeline, just zoom out. It's the same but different. There's work in the setup. Something like hot sauce is going to be work in the processing, but otherwise, it's downtime. It's something that kind of does what it does with or without you. Finally, saying, as a beverage professional, I feel like I get a new bottle in, or I have something I want to play around with. I get a lot of tries. I can make something. If I don't like it, I dump it. I try again. The final product is very reliant on me and what I do. Fermenting at home taught me to think differently because it's more about the setup, and I can consider an idea, but then you sit back and watch. Like the control freak in me, the first batch or two was every day I want to look at it, I want to touch it, I want to taste it. It taught me to let go a little bit. And I feel even in a meditative way, that's been good for me, at least for my mental health. And then for my kitchen, because I've got delicious things hanging around all the time now.
Dude, that is amazing. I love it.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
so you got some resources you want to reference?
If any of what I said seems like something you might want to try, again, feel free to check in with me, but this is where I've found some cool stuff. The Noma Guide is amazing. These other books that I've read have been really interesting and, just for different perspectives on it always. A couple really good Instagram follows there. And then some of my favorites on YouTube. Chili Chump, like I mentioned before, with the Fermentator. That's definitely worth looking at. That's a cool setup. And then Mangchi does some really interesting traditional Korean foods. And she's done videos in 10 or 12 different styles of kimchi. So I feel like in developing the way I do mine, I've also, been through a bunch of her videos and taken notes and kind of, decided which bits I wanted to keep and which bits I didn't. She does some with, she does a kimchi with raw squid in it. I don't know that I'm quite ready for that, but I'm glad to know that it's there for when I am. So, but the same kind of thing, like anything else we do in our life or in our job, you get different perspectives and you kind of center in on how you want to do it your way. You learn the easy way, the hard way, and figure out what's going to work for you.
Awesome. Well, before we close out here, got 2 more questions. I think
throw them at me. Love it.
Because we got to talk picklebacks, right? Who would be if we didn't? So, why do we think people love picklebacks in general? And then, what is your ideal brine and wild turkey pairing? Whichever wild turkey expression and whichever.
The 101. Sorry to cut you off, but the 101 for sure. Always the 101.
All right. 101.
One of my favorite pickles that I've made from the same, regular garlic sour batch and brine that I've made is that what I've done is actually taken fresh horseradish, grated the fresh horseradish, put a little bit of vinegar, salt, sugar, sort of prepare that. So what I'll do when I jar it is I'll just throw a whole big scoop of horseradish in the bottom and then fill it up with pickles and the brine. In the end, you give that a couple days to sit, and the whole thing just reeks of that fresh, bright, spicy horseradish. That with the spice behind on the 101, might need a nap afterwards, but man, delicious. Yeah. Really,
sounds like that'll clear your sinuses as well.
That will clear your everything.
All right. Well, last but not least,
get me.
what pickled ingredient should everyone really be eating and enjoying all the time?
I don't want to be dramatic with it, but I mean, having kimchi around changed my life. I really like it. It's good for you, and the health benefits are supposedly huge. Between the antioxidants and everything else that it provides, it's very good for you. And I've just developed such an affinity for it. Like I don't want to be without it. That would be my push. I would say if you're going to try anything, go with the kimchi.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's tough
Well,
to beat.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, dude. I hope this was informative.
It's been so fun. It's been
Amazing.
Informative. I know you weren't claiming you're an expert in the beginning, but you kind of sound like you know what you're talking about. So
I've got a little bit of experience now, but there's still a lot to learn.
So for anybody with any questions, feel free to reach out to Doug on Instagram and at his pickle specific Instagram as well. You got options. And if you enjoyed this class, give us a like, give us a love, give us a comment, help spread the word. Follow us on Instagram at PDXCW. And then if you think you know someone who would really enjoy this information, share it with them. Maybe they're not on Facebook. PDXCW is also on YouTube. So youtube.com/PDXCW. And of course, if you're watching on Facebook, facebook.com/PDXCW. So lots of places, lots of great content. Follow them, follow Doug, and finally, don't forget at Campari Community. You can go to Campari America mailing list.splashthat.com as well if you're interested in getting really cool mailers, gifts throughout the year, seasonal holidays, little fun things that revolve around all of our brands. Sign up right there. You can see that mailing list scrolling at the bottom. All the time people ask, hey, how do I sign up to get all those little goodies in the mail? That's where it is. And then remember, Campari Community on Instagram, and also Campari Academy _US. That's another good one to follow. So stay tuned. There's going to be more stuff coming up. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks again, Doug.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you.